Namaste World Raiser, Sabine and Roger here. Let's watch the untold story of idol worship in Bharat by the amazing YouTube channel Project Shivoham.
Yeah, and for those of you who still may not know, if you're not watching us regularly, you might not know what Bharat is. So that's just India, except the ancient name for that landmass, and it was actually much larger and bigger back in ancient times. So idol worship is still very much debated, misunderstood by a lot of aspects and areas of the world, like different religions don't really understand it. So if you are one of those, maybe open your mind and your heart to actually learning what it's about. With greater understanding comes a greater opening, a greater letting go, and a greater sense of unity and understanding of what other religions are all about. Hit that like button if you like the idea of unity and harmony and greater understanding.
If you visit any ancient temple in Bharat, which is at the very least 300 to 400 years old or even older, there's a fair amount of chance that you would come across these kinds of vandalized idols. And also it's a well-known fact that because of Islamic invasions, a significant amount of art and architecture of Bharat has been vandalized because of the contentious views and beliefs of the invaders on idol worship. This short doc film is aimed at bringing a holistic understanding of the past, present and the future as far as these contentions go. We tried our best to bring forward the story in the most respectable format without denigrating any community or religion. And I request you strictly to refrain any kind of derogatory comments and to uphold the decorum of this channel.
Yeah, perfect.
The first chapter, let's try and understand the history of contentions on idol worship. Around the world in the history of humankind, worshipping a deity in the form of an idol is nothing special at all. Every culture in every part of the world had their own manifestations, cultures, ways and means of worshipping different kinds of deities. Strictly speaking, this topic is not worth a topic where we can learn something new. This is a very bland topic in my opinion, because every culture has their own ways and means of worshipping, and why should anyone have a problem with other culture in first place? Nonetheless, let's try and understand where it started. Some 3,500 years back in time, that's around 1500 BC and thereabouts, a group of people called Israelites, led by a man called Moses, started their journey from Egypt towards the east in search of a new homeland. And the story of this community called Israelites is what later developed into a religion called as Judaism, and from it originated Christianity and Islam as well. All three put together are called as Abrahamic religions, as we all know. To put a very long story in simple terms, Moses is revered as a prophet in all three Abrahamic religions, and especially in Judaism. He is revered as the first prophet. And Moses wanted his community, the Israelites, who were under slavery back then in Egypt, and lead them to a new homeland under the revelation and the instructions from a God called Jehovah. Moses manages to lead his entire community out of Egypt in search of a new homeland, and in their journey, he strictly instructs the entire Israelite community to worship no one other than Jehovah. However, during the journey, the Israelite community makes an idol of a golden calf or a golden cow or a bull, whatever it could be, a bovine basically. And then they start worshipping this golden bovine. And that is when Moses strictly implements punishment for those who resorted this. And from then on, idol worship has been absolutely forbidden in Judaism. And the same ideology was inherited into Christianity and Islam as well. And this golden calf episode from the Hebrew Bible or the Old Testament of Bible is essentially the origins of why the Abrahamic religions were against idol worship. Idol worship is considered as an unpardonable offense in all these three religions. And good for them, and I have no interest in criticizing any of these, as you might know. But the problem is, when this ideology was imposed on Bharat, or for that matter, rest of many parts of the world where colonization happened, like the pagan religions and cultures in Europe, or in Africa, or in the Americas or Australia, the local religions and cultures, the art and architecture suffered a lot. And a good live example is hundreds of temples across Bharat, which are vandalized. One of the prime reasons is the aversion towards idol worship from this ideology is fundamentally the root cause. And let me also make my position very clear. We are no way disrespecting or disregarding any religion or ideology. If idol worship is forbidden in a religion or a group of religions, good for them. But vandalism can never be justified. And with all due respect towards every religion and culture, we are trying to make this doc film to bring a clear-cut awareness about the history and the present and future as well. So that is a brief history of why idol worship was very contentious. And also by extension, idol worship in this context doesn't limit only to a physical manifestation of a deity, like a sculpture. It goes beyond that, like worshipping a tree or a mountain or a river, worshipping parts of nature. It is also forbidden and is equally considered as an unpardonable offense from these ideologies.
Wow.
Discovering the universal truth. In Bharat, we have a diverse set of cultures where people worship trees, rivers, mountains, different kinds of animals, needless to mention, cow, different deities in different kinds of manifestations, elements of nature, and the list goes on and on. Let's try to take a step back and ask one simple and a basic question. Why do people worship at all? And for the next couple of minutes, let's try to probe into this question.
Wow.
And while doing so, don't try to act secular. Because if you try to act secular, then your ability to think will drastically drop. Holding to our question of why do people worship at all in first place, let's try to expand our premise out of Bharat. If we
Beautiful.
turn back the pages of the history of humankind, be it the pagan traditions in Europe or the Native American cultures or the Africans or the Australian Aboriginals, this concept of worshipping exists throughout the history of humankind. So let us expand the premise of our question. Not just in Bharat, but around the world, people worship different kinds of things like rivers, mountains, animals, deities from the respective cultures, and so on. Why so? For thousands of years around the world, people have been continuously in search of better food, better shelter, and better clothing, and a better lifestyle. So all this fits very logically. But then one pattern of worshipping, what explains that? And if one tries to observe with that question and a perspective, this 5-step pattern would possibly emerge as an answer. And these are my observations that I would like to share with you. Let us take sun. Sun is a very common deity in many cultures around the world. So now let us try to retro-simulate the thought process of our ancestors. And I'm not referring only to Bharat, but around the world. Why is that people worshipped sun? So let's take a practical example. So here we go. The first and basic state of mind of early men and women would be of ignorance. I don't know what sun. Other than the fact that it's a shiny object up there in the sky that is giving me light and heat, I don't know what is sun. That's where we all would have started. Slowly over the time, the early men and women, they experienced sun. When they went on a quest for food and when the sun shines bright, there is a good amount of chance that the nature around us would blossom, and there you get fruits and vegetables and all and whatnot. And on the flip side, if the sun doesn't shine because of rainy season or during the winter, the availability of food drops. Now all this is from one part of the climate of the world. In other parts of the world, summers you might not get food and winter you might get food. Bottom line is, I experience the fact that sun is the source of my food on earth. And this experience, which evolves from ignorance, is the second state of mind. Up next is the third state of mind that evolves from experience, which is gratitude. Sun might be a shiny little thing up there in the sky, but depending on the fact that whether sun is shining or not, it is directly impacting whether I'll be able to get food for my stomach or not, what kind of clothing I would need, what kind of shelter that I need to build. I realize that sun has a straight and direct impact on all these aspects of my survival and life. So I wait with a sense of gratitude for it to shine or not shine, depending on which part of the world I'm living in. For my existence, for me to survive and for me to live, I wait with gratitude for this little shiny object to shine or not shine. And when the gratitude intensifies, that evolves into another state of mind, that is respect. I realize the fact that I am alive only because of sun. And when this state of mind, the fourth state of respect, further intensifies, that evolves into an emotion called devotion. I prostrate to sun. I worship sun. Because me and everything around me is existing only because of sun. When I realize this fact with a deep sense of emotion, that's when I start worshipping sun and I get devoted to sun. Now this 5-step evolution from ignorance to experience to gratitude to respect and finally to devotion. This is why possibly and logically around the world people worship different kinds of entities. Tribal people in the forest worship mountains, rivers and trees. A fisherman might worship a river or sea. A carpenter might worship his tools. Everywhere, the common pattern is when that object of worship or the entity of worship is deeply connected to the life and livelihood of a person, that is when people worship that specific entity. Let us take a more relatable example. When we were just born, we are in a state of ignorance. We don't know anyone, we don't know anything other than our mother and of course father as well. That is the first state of mind, ignorance. And then slowly evolves experience. As we grow and we get toys and gifts and clothes and presents from our parents, we experience all that sweetness. And as we further grow, get into teenage and becomes more matured, we feel that gratitude towards our parents. And once we get into our own job or business and when we start earning and paying our own bills, then we might realize the hardships of our parents in raising us. And then we are going to develop a real and deep respect for our parents. And finally, when that emotion intensifies and when you really miss your parents, that is when you get devoted to your parents. So all in all, this 5-step evolution of ignorance, experience, gratitude, respect and devotion, this pattern perfectly fits around the world in whichever culture you take, in whichever entity or an object that you are devoted towards. This is possibly the logic and reason behind this question of why people worship. And if we take the Bhartiya context of worshipping sun as Surya Bhagavan, where sun is deified as Surya Bhagavan, and there are great and grand temples dedicated for Surya Bhagavan and people worship him. And if one takes a closer and deeper look into the philosophy of worshipping Surya Bhagavan, astonishing details will be revealed. Surya Bhagavan has been the central deity in development of mathematics in Bharat. And not just in the field of science, in terms of spirituality as well. Every dawn and dusk, as part of Sandhya Vandanam, along with Gayatri Mantram, people worship Surya Bhagavan, both spiritually and scientifically. The worship of Surya Bhagavan in the history of Bharat is very wide, deep and complex. And the temples dedicated for Surya Bhagavan, for instance, the Martand Sun Temple of Kashmir, what you're seeing here, is vandalized. Now what logic or reason explains vandalizing such great and grand structures, which are historically, spiritually and scientifically deeply rooted into the culture of Bharat? What explains the logic and reason behind this vandalism? Think about it. So that's about this chapter on the question of why do people worship, and because of this 5-step evolution. And this is the universal truth, but this is just half of the truth, one side of the coin. But the other side of the coin shows another pattern as well. Ignorance, experience, insecurity, fear and superstition. People can worship sun because of superstition as well. Now the reason for why people worship could be either because of devotion or because of superstition. Now how are you going to figure out whether it is devotion or superstition? It's pretty simple. If experience leads to insecurity, fear, these aspects, then that essentially ends up in superstition. But the experience, if it nurtures gratitude and respect, then that leads to devotion.
I love it.
That brings us to the third and last chapter, the Bhartiya philosophy on idol worship. Now let us try to take the same 5-step evolution towards devotion to the next level. If sun is the prime cause for my existence and I worship sun, that perfectly fits in the logic. Then what is the reason for existence of sun itself? Because it's a chain reaction. Because of something, sun exists, and because of sun, I exist. So the sense of devotion goes up high into the chain, up until the primordial cause for the existence of this nature and cosmos. And in Bharatiya context, or in the Bharatiya philosophy, that primordial cause is revered as Brahman. In Bharatiya philosophy, Brahman holds the highest spiritual position and is the epitome of nature, cosmos and everything in it. The essence of Bharatiya philosophy is all about discovering, understanding, experiencing, and finally dissolving in Brahman. And as a quick side note, the moment you hear this word Brahman, a lot of negative connotations will definitely kick in.
What?
Unfortunately, many people denigrated it and abused it from both sides of the table. All that might be for another day. But for today, let's continue understanding Brahman. The essence of all the 4 Vedas and the tons of many other scriptures is all about understanding Brahman. So let's pick up one relatively simpler scripture called 𝐀𝐻𝐻. 𝐀𝐻𝐻 ascribes to Samavedam, and the word 𝐀𝐻 means question. 𝐀𝐻𝐻 is all about a dialectical conversation between a guru and a Sishya. Sishya asks the guru, what is the cause for the existence of this nature and cosmos? Where it all started. Pretty interesting and deep conversation. And this is how it goes. Sishya asks his guru, what is the cause for mind to think? What is the cause for life to thrive? What is the cause for people's ability to speak? How does intelligence command the eye and the ear to function the way they are? So basically the essence of the question is, what is that one primordial cause for this entire nature to function the way it is? The guru replies, the answer to your question, the primordial cause for our existence, that cause cannot be seen by a human eye. The speech cannot describe it. The mind cannot understand it. We don't know how to instruct anyone about it. It is distinct from the known and above unknown. That primordial cause is revered as Brahman. And the Guru continues, what one cannot think with mind, but by which the mind is made to think. What speech does not enlighten, but what enlightens speech. What cannot be seen by the human eye, but by which the eyes are being able to see. That cause is called as Brahman. If we try to articulate this in simpler terms, this entire universe and everything in it is a complex web of cause and effect. Now for every effect, there will be a cause. And if one tries to continuously question backwards to trace the cause for every effect, then finally the answer or the final cause would be Brahman. And if all this sounds very complicated and complex and difficult to understand, clumsy and whatnot, then you are not alone. Krishna in Bhagavad Gita himself says that this aspect of understanding Brahman for normal people like you and me is extremely difficult. And this is what he says. क्लेशोऽधिकतरस्तेषाम् अव्यक्तासक्तचेतसाम् अव्यक्ता हि गतिर्दुःखम् देहवाद्भिर् अवाप्यते. The translation is, for the human beings with materialistic perspective, understanding and worshipping the Brahman in an unmanifested form is very difficult. And such kind of a worship of Brahman in unmanifested form is called as Nirakaropasana, which is very difficult. That is the reason why Brahman is understood and worshipped in 2 different forms. One is Sakara and the other one is Nirakara. Sakaropasana is where we have the Murti Puja or the idol worship, which is loosely translated into English. And this aspect of idol worship originated with the cause to understand Brahman. In Nirakaropasana, these idols or the murtis or the puja, all these rituals will not be there. It's totally a different kind of practice. Now comes the reason why I chose to make a doc film on this subject. Now the people who are motivated to have this religious conversion business, they're trying to twist and tweak this Nirakaropasana into a fact that, see, Sanatana Dharma itself does not promote idol worship or murti puja, and it is very offensive. They're trying to push their point, their agenda, their business of conversions by misleading people and misquoting the scriptures of Sanatana Dharma and to pull people into their religious business, whatever it is. Fact of the matter is, Sakaropasana is meant for everybody, and this is where you have the physical manifestations of the divine entities. And Nirakaropasana is relatively very difficult process of understanding Brahman. And in the practice of Nirakaropasana, there are no murtis or idols or any physical manifestations of Brahman. One propagating his or her own religion is nothing wrong. It's completely constitutional, legal, moral, ethical and whatnot. But the problem starts when one starts to denigrate another religion with a malicious intention to pull people towards one's own religion. And we have ample of such religious salespeople all around us. And they try to twist and tweak, saying that the idol worship is not even mentioned in Vedas also. God knows if they even know the spelling of the Vedas. But they still try to twist and tweak our scriptures with a malicious intention to push their religious agenda. Yajurvedam, Adharvana Vedam, Agama Shastram, Shilpa Shastram, all these scriptures and many more very clearly articulate what kind of murti puja should be done. What should be the structure and shape and form of all these murtis or idols? I'm not even getting into the spiritual aspects of it. Prana Pratishta. This itself is an incredibly deep subject when it comes to murti puja. To keep things simple so that all of us can understand, I'm refraining from all that. But the point is, there are many scriptures which foundationally explain how idol worship should be done and for what reason and purpose in Sanatana Dharma. So don't get misled by such kind of religious salespeople. Use your common sense, logical thinking ability, and if you have interest, read the scriptures and then form an informed opinion for yourself. In my last couple of years of research, if I really have to summarize what I understood and learned in one line in this context of worshipping, here it is. While in most parts of the world, people were fighting and killing each other for this question on who is God, in Bharat, there were discussions and discourses on what is God. If you don't know what is God, then how can you ever say who is God? And here is a very interesting thing. In Bharat, as part of these discussions and debates, and out of this very conducive spiritual atmosphere, there emerged ideologies where you don't even need God. There is no need for God. Such kind of ideologies also thrived out of Bharat. Vandalizing temples and idols in the name of religion only shows, or rather highlights, the incapabilities and insecurities of those ideologies. The pluralistic, inclusive, conducive, and spiritual culture and heritage of Bharat should always be preserved for the betterment of humanity.
Thank you, Project Shivoham. Fantastic video.
Loved it. Didn't pull any punches there. You let it out, right?
Yes.
So, and I got to say, I agree 100% with him and his philosophy and his understanding, right? So, and I understand it that way too. People have a real hard time understanding what God is, right? And that's why you even have these debates. Like we did a video a while ago on our channel. I think we had to turn it to a members only video.
Oh, yeah.
Because it just sparked a whole bunch of debate and controversy and negativity and hate in the comment section because we talked about, well, is Allah Brahman, right? So the part of it, if you've made it this long in the video, you're going to have an understanding just to kind of bear with that the understanding of God is what's important here. And I know he wasn't really touching on it. He was just being very subtle, but I'll talk about it plainly, is that some religions have a higher understanding of what God is than others. That's just the way it is. Because if you don't understand that God is the source of absolutely everything, even though you think that you know that, you actually don't. You're still in a state of ignorance if you're going to denigrate and vandalize other people's religion that is ancient, way more ancient in reality than yours, and then you're going because of this, right? So I love that he touched on the golden calf and where that stemmed from, because that's how I understand it as well. And then, so when I am talking to, Christians, for example, and this comes up, I'll remind them that story was talking about false idols, originally, right? He's like, don't worship false idols, because everything in reality is an idol, even having a mental conception of what God is. And then you're worshiping God, claiming that it's not material, there's no form of it. It's not the sun. It's definitely not the sun. So it's nothing, but it's the source of everything. If you're worshiping that, that's still a concept in your mind. It's still an idol. It's still a thought. It's still a thing. It's still a thing that exists in your mind, right? So there is actually no non-idol worship. So then what happened in Bharat, just with their knowledge of what is easier to worship? Is it easier to worship, an image like the sun, or you really got to be adept, almost like a spiritual genius in a way to be able to understand, the unmanifest God, beyond everything. So that's why you go through the causes of creation to the root, right? And I love the example of the sun, right? Well, what is the cause of the sun? And it's very clear that in primitive times, pagan days, that the sun was very prominently worshipped, right? And then the stages, ignorance, what is the sun? Oh, the sun is the source of life. It's the source of food. It's the source of everything good. It's why we exist. So a very, very valid image of worship. But then you go deeper, more philosophical. Well, what's the source of the sun? And then the Upanishads, of course, talking about the ultimate supreme reality. And I love that Upanishad in particular, right? I say it all the time. It's not that the eyes can see, it's that by which the eyes can see. It's not that the mind can think, it's that by which the mind can think. So what is that? Well, that's consciousness, that's awareness, that's your higher self, your true self, God. It's the power, it's the energy that sustains all life. Like we're energetic, spiritual beings. So then we're understanding that the ultimate reality, non-form, manifesting as all forms. But can you worship that as a form? Well, absolutely. In the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna talks about it. It's easier to worship him as form. And then eventually you do understand that he's also non-form at the same time. So everything is God, right? So the limitations are, of course, when your ideology, which in reality it's a more limited way of thinking about things if you're going to attack other religions, right? Instead of being like, and then you also really got to talk about like the truly enlightened beings, like Jesus, for example. Whether he went to India or not doesn't matter, but he was definitely promoting the worship of God, right? The divine. And if he was around nowadays, and if he did go to India, do you think he would have had any problem with any sort of worship at all? No, there would have been no problem. He would have seen that, oh, these are amazing. And he would have been learning, how do these people worship God? Because it's all valid. Like it's potent, it's powerful, right? Because we're all drawn to something, even if you think that your God is the supreme and it's more true than everybody else's. Even if that is true, you're not practicing the teachings of that truth correctly if you're trying to get others to do it exactly the same as you, because that actually limits God. You're limiting God. So if you hold in mind that God is unlimited, the source of everything, right? And then you tell others that they can't worship God in the way that they're worshiping, then you just limited God. So then in reality, are you actually worshiping God, or is it something else, right? Because God is the source of, we all agree God is the source of love, compassion, wisdom, kindness, all the higher virtues, right? Source of absolutely everything, all beings, right? And then that love is not differentiated. It's not like the sun is going to shine just on certain people. No, the sun is for everybody. God is for everybody. So, and I think personally, it's way more fun and all-inclusive to learn about other cultures and how they're worshiping and practicing than to be like, my way is the only way. Sabine, you had some aha moments?
I loved it. Absolutely loved it. I have nothing to add here, though. But thank you so much. That was eye-opening. Yep.
Project
Very helpful.
Shivoham.
Very
Yep.
helpful.
And any Christians, Muslims, Jews that maybe watch this to learn. So it's very clear, and I'll stress it as well, is like you can hold on to your belief that, idol worship is wrong. And I agree what he's saying in this video is that your religion is entitled to be the way that it is. But when it's imposing its view onto others and saying that they're wrong, well, you need to go back and really seek to understand what God actually is. Sorry, but that's the way it is. You got to unlimit your mind. You have to, and you can hold on to your belief even if it's rigid, but try to make it more unlimited. Because if your belief of God is limited, then your view of God is a limited God, right? But by unlimiting your belief that God is unlimited, then you could understand that, God can be worshipped in certain ways. And then back to the golden calf, it's not the calf that was the problem. So my understanding of Moses is that it's not the calf, it's a symbolic, it's a gold calf, right? So then this is going into, we're worshiping wealth, gold, you know, there's this greed that goes with the golden calf. But, you know, in all senses, in Bharat, you know, the calf is a sacred animal, and there is, you know, cow worship, right? But it's not like the cow is the supreme deity, but the supreme deity is the source of the cow, and then the cow is giving life, right? It's giving, you know, milk and sustenance.
So the golden calf is then, it's a symbol for materialism.
That's how I view it.
Okay,
Yeah.
it makes sense now, because, okay.
Yeah, it's gold, right? Okay. So that was the problem, is that. And then, so you look in the world right now, and even if you're in an Abrahamic religion, and let's not beat around the bush, it's totally true that there are Christians, and I'm sure Muslims as well, and Jews that are greedy. You know, you see like rap hip hop stars with like a big gold chain with Jesus on it, right? So there is this materialism and there's this greed, you know, in the Abrahamic religions, obviously. So what's happening there? Well, they're worshiping the golden calf. So they're doing the very thing that they're telling other religions they're not allowed to do.
Oh my God, we had that the other day. It's exactly the same with the caste system.
Yeah, so this gold, this wealth, this materialism, that's very Western. That's like, you know, the British and the other Western European cultures imposed that on the world. You know, slavery, that was all to generate wealth, to promote the greed, and this was mostly, you know, Christians coming out of Europe doing that. So being Christian, thinking our God is the better, these guys are worshiping idols, when in reality they were worshiping idols too. They were worshiping wealth and the pride and the ego, and we're better, and we're gonna go and, you know, vandalize these other cultures and then extract their wealth so we could get our golden calf bigger.
Okay.
Right? So let me know if you agree or disagree with my views and what's your take on it. But remember, like Project Shivoham man said, we should probably learn his name. But remember what he said in the videos, let's be respectful and kind, and everybody's entitled to have their religion.
Beautifully said. Mm-hmm.
And the best thing about Bharat and Hinduism, it's the most all-encompassing, but now at the same time, we got to be like, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Mm-hmm.
You guys don't mess with our religion no more, please. Right?
Boom.
So anyways, thanks guys.
Dhanyavad.
Dhanyavad. We'll see you on the next one.
Yeah. May God bless you all in whatever form or
yes.
formless form.
Peace.